You took a trip to Peru not long ago. What's something that you understand better now before going there and seeing where a lot of the fish that we get come from?
Yeah, so for me, it was, what we keep in an aquarium is nothing like nature at all. In that there's so much mold and debris and poor lighting and plastic bottles and garbage and that tire and all of this stuff, which we'd be mortified, which if it was in our aquarium, and yet you're like, oh, look at that cichlid's breeding inside the tire, and oh, look, there's a fish stuck inside that plastic bottle, and that so many fish die from natural causes. So we think about like all of that stuff I just talked about, all that pollution. Yeah, it's horrible, and it is. But then so many fish just naturally die in the waterway that, oh, they got separated from the mainstream. We've all seen that. We've walked a river or something like that, a little jetty or something. They're like, oh, it got cut off. All the fish in there just die. And there's, the first thing that when you go there and you're with guides and stuff, everyone's instinct, they say, is always, we have to save these fish. Or either that, or we need to collect these fish and take them home to our aquarium. And they struggle with teaching you that those fish are already dead. They're already oxygen deprived. Putting them in a bucket's not going to help. Putting them out back in the water is not going to help. They're weakened. They haven't been eating. They're just going to get eaten by another fish instantly. You're going to spend all day basically feeding fish to a bigger fish, thinking you're helping them. And so that was a hard thing to like. You don't comprehend the amount of tetras and just all the fish that are going to die with that cycle in Peru of like, yeah, floods, and there's billions of fish that breed, and there's so many, and then the water comes down, and 99% of those die. And so what we take out, well, it's wet, on average, doesn't even have an impact on what's going to happen in there while we're super worried about it. But if we do it in any remote or any way sustainably, it should work just fine. Now, there were locations we went to where it was like a cattle pond or something like that where it didn't boom and bust. And so if you did fish that, you could overfish it easily, and that would become a problem. But for the most part, just seeing that every ditch and everything like that had really cool fish in it, and that the Amazon River, even when low, is so wide you can't see the other side. It is hard to. You see it on a map, you're like, yeah, that's a big river, and then you see it in person, you're like, wow, you can't comprehend how big it is and how deep it is, and all of that. Even when it's at its lowest, we were getting to points where the boat couldn't go any further, and it's towards the end of the season at its lowest, and it's still a massive thing. And the houses that we went to some people that collected fish would sell them to the exporters and everything. And all those houses were on floats. So they were just sitting on the sand, kind of crooked, and all the tanks would be like one side would be full and the other side would be really low because it would just sit like that. And when the water came back up, they would then float. And there was like these makeshift bridges. One actually collapsed while I was going over it. Luckily, like no one got hurt. But they're just like, it's like if you've ever walked on a board that's seen, the outdoors for way too long, and you're like, that thing's slippery and gonna break. That's the only thing they've got for like these little bridges and makeshift things. And then you've got the other obstacle of all the power that kind of goes to the houses is just like these really low-hanging lines that it'd be like I'm stringing it out there, and they're all open wire, so you got to be kind of really careful. And when you see kind of fish and stuff thriving in those types of environments, then you come back to our perfectly escaped ADA tank and all of that. You're like, oh, okay, so when I do kill fish, it's probably like killing it with kindness and not so much adverse conditions got them, because it's like I've seen adverse conditions, or what I consider adverse conditions, and the fish love it.
Well, I always wondered too. Like I've always thought that too. Like how pristine our aquariums are compared to. I think I started noticing it was like when botanicals became more widely used. And I got my first set of botanicals, and I took a nice pristine aquarium and I dumped leaves in it, like something I would pick out of a swimming pool or a pond or whatever. And I'm like, that looks so much better. Why does that look so much more? Because that's what it would be. I mean, it would just be covered with leaves, like literally clogged with leaves and stuff. And I think I think it's funny, and I wonder like to us it looks better, you know, all nice and clean. But I wonder if you throw a fish in there, they're like, "What is this place?
I do think, you
It's
know,
unnatural."
I don't know if natural is the right word. I think a natural aquarium that would have lots of kind of molmy and just stuff that had fallen in and breaking down. It's got way more little crustaceans that live in it, way more little microfoods for babies, and it in general will raise a fish and keep them healthier and better. But it's unsightly to us, and it's always that a dichotomy of what do we want and what are we willing to take care of versus something else. And I try to run some natural aquariums in my fish room, and the internet just loses their mind. Like, how could you abuse those fish? And you're like, these are wild caught. If you knew what they were living in, where they came from, like this is mimicking that. I can't always know that where they came from wild is their preferred living condition, but they
I
weren't
threw a
spawning.
tire in and everything.
Yeah, they weren't spawning in pristine conditions, and they're still not spawning in this like more molmy condition. But they're eating a lot more active, and they're coming out a lot more. So they're showing some good signs, and so I have a real open mind when it comes to that. Of just like I know I would love to see so many more things out there of what is it actually like? What are the temperatures actually like? When you go and some of the times the water's really warm, sometimes it's really cold. Like when we were in Peru one time, it got so cold where the temperature, you're thinking, okay, tropical fish, all of that, got to be hot all the time. And it dropped into the 40s and it was a storm. And where we were staying, this little like house that had wax floors and everything and generator for heat or for lights. There's no actual windows. It was just screen to keep bugs out. And then you didn't have any blankets. You had one thin sheet because 9 times out of 10, it's really hot there. And so, but then I start thinking, I'm like, wait, it got down into the 40s, like really cold for like a couple of days and really raining. And when you went and collected the next day in that rain, the water was much colder, like noticeably cold. And here we would say like, but that discus is going to die in too cold of water. And it's like, yeah, but the water's really cold today. So I think we don't give enough credit to, they can handle, maybe they do go down in the 50-degree water, 60-degree water for a week or two, and then they come back up. We're thinking, oh, heater broke. If that doesn't get fixed tomorrow, everything's dead. And the reality is fish are really hardy. We just push them to their breaking point without knowing it most times.
Thank you so much for watching this brief excerpt from the Water Change Companion. The full version of this will be available at the end of the week. See you then.